Good afternoon, everyone. At this point, I will open the meeting, this August 13th meeting of the Management Committee. And again, welcome. You'll see before you, we do have the Dakota Land Water People Acknowledgement. We are not going to read this today, but we encourage you to understand both our commitment and take a look at our website where you'll find this acknowledgement. And now I'll move over to the call to the order, and you have your agenda before you. If there's no changes, I'll just move on. Any other changes? Seeing none. We do have to have approval on this one, and that is our July 23rd,
Yes.
July 23rd Management Committee minutes. Entertain a motion.
Second.
Made. Councilman Lilligan, second by Councilman Osmond. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We don't have any consent items at this point. We do have non-consent business and reports of the standing committee. So at this time, I'll move to business item 2025-191, Oracle Annual Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you. My name is Brant Fettel, and I'm the Chief Data Officer. I'm here with Jody Jacoby, our Chief Procurement Officer. The business item for the Oracle Annual Renewal. I'll first provide background on what Oracle is and how it's used in Council. So Oracle is a company known for its database software, its enterprise software and hardware. This item is a maintenance support contract for our Oracle software and hardware, which provides security updates, product upgrades, replacement hardware, and technical support. Oracle products are used in every division of the Council. Many of the Council's mission-critical systems use Oracle, such as PeopleSoft for human resources and finance, Hyperion for budgeting, and WAM for work asset management for part of our organization. And there are also important systems for bus and light rail, such as HASTA scheduling, cubic fare collection, and Metro Mobility. In addition to software, we have Oracle hardware, which supports close to 100 mission-critical Oracle databases. And the Council has a significant Oracle footprint. So Jody's going to describe a little bit about procurement background on this topic.
Mr. Chair, committee members, I'm Jody Jacoby again, the Chief Procurement Officer. And as we're setting up projects, one of the tools that we look at that was utilized with this procurement is a cooperative procurement venture. And what that means is another public entity, and in this case it was the state of Minnesota, had a cooperative contract available for use, where they went out and solicited the market, secured pricing, have contracts in place so we are able to use it immediately. And on average, with a national cooperative procurement contract, it's been proven to save, depending on the project, about $17,000 per procurement. And so this was one of the procurements where we were able to take advantage of a already solicited contract and get it into place quickly. One of the other benefits with this contract is the reseller is a MCUB certified provider, which, as you know, is a Metropolitan Council underutilized business. And although the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity did not set a goal, it was a huge advantage for us to be able to contract with an MCUB provider. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Brant.
Thank you. So the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute a contract with Collier Vasky, a Vasky Computer Company, an Oracle Platinum Partner, to provide Oracle maintenance and support services in an amount not to exceed 1.8 million. Thank you. And Jody and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Members? Seeing none? All right, then, we're at the point we're at is with proposed action that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute a contract with Collier, a vast computer company, and Oracle Platinum partner to provide Oracle maintenance and support services in an amount not to exceed $1,800,000.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, moving to item number 2, 2025-190, the Labor Arbitration Advocacy and Consulting Services Contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Valerie Darling. I'm a Labor Relations Program Manager. And with me as well is Jody Jacoby, the Chief Procurement Officer. Mr. Chair and committee members, I'm here to present business item 190 for Labor Advocacy and Consulting Services, contracts 25P, 226A, and B. The Labor Relations Unit within the Human Resources Department is responsible for collective bargaining negotiations and grievance arbitration advocacy, among other duties, for the Council's more than 4,000 employees represented by 12 labor unions. When the volume of work exceeds staff capacity or there is a need for specific labor law expertise, labor relations may require the assistance of outside counsel to advocate at grievance or interest arbitrations, respond to unfair labor practice charges, or provide additional labor law and labor relations assistance, strategy, and advice. This project solicitation is the result of the expiration of our current contracts with outside labor counsel. A request for proposals was issued on April 8th, 2025, and on May 20th, 2025, the council received 3 proposals which were evaluated by a panel based on quality, qualifications, experience, and price. The evaluation panel reached consensus that 2 proposals provide the best overall value to the council. Therefore, Mr. Chair and committee members, we respectfully request that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contracts 25P, 226A, and B for labor arbitration advocacy and consulting services that will support all council departments in an amount not to exceed $700,000 as follows. Wiley Reber Law PC, contract number 25P226A, in the amount of $400,000, and Madden Galanter Hansen LLP, contract number 25P226B, in the contract amount of $300,000. Thank you.
Is there any questions from the members?
I do. Chair, just a question on why there's 2 firms as opposed to just a single firm on the contract?
Mr. Chair, committee members, to offer in case there is a conflict or if there's a need to provide more service in case there's staffing issues.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, the proposed action that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contracts 25P, 226A-B for labor arbitration, advocacy, and consulting services that will support all council departments in an amount not to exceed $700,000 as follows. Organization Wiley Reber PC and Madden Guarantee, I think that's correct, Hansen LLP. The proposed action is before you.
So move.
Second.
It's been made, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we're moving on. All right. To number 3, 2025-199, Federal Transit Administration Drug and Alcohol Policy.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sherry Chestnut. I'm the Deputy Chief Human Resources Officer. And today I'm excited to introduce you to Melissa Haas, who is our Senior Human Resources Manager for our occupational health team. Melissa joined us in, it'll be a year in October. So this will be her first time presenting before you today. With that, I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you for that introduction, and I want to just let you know that we have also here with us as support Chris Erickson. She is one of our drug and alcohol program coordinators who has worked very diligently on the two policies that will be here before you. So she is serving as our subject matter expert and can also answer any questions that you may have. So we have just a very brief presentation to summarize these two business items that we have brought before you. The first, we're going to go over the revised Federal Transit Administration, or the FTA, drug and alcohol policy. And this policy is required by federal statute. It governs the drug and alcohol testing and procedures for our safety-sensitive employees that are working in designated roles that are regulated by the FTA. So that will be in our bus and light rail operations. That includes commercial driver's license holders and other safety-sensitive positions that support that work. We have had a policy in place since January of 1995. Back in August of 2023, we had an audit by the FTA, and it was found that we had some certain inaccuracies, things to be addressed, and that has now been done. Staff worked with the FTA's policy builder tool that they provide, and we now have a revised policy being presented, which has been reviewed and deemed compliant by an FTA auditor. I just want to note that the policy itself does differentiate those pieces which are FTA mandated, so regulatory provisions, that which is discretionary policy decision, things like discipline and return to work procedures are noted in bold in the policy. We have also before you today as a separate business item the Federal Railroad Administration Drug and Alcohol Policy, or the FRA Drug and Alcohol Policy. This also is required by federal statute in order to be compliant, and similar to the FTA, it governs drug and alcohol testing procedures for those regulated by Federal Railroad Authority. And this is important for our North Star commuter rail operations, but also for the extension of the Metro Green Line, and that is due to its adjacency to some regulated freight rail lines, and specifically 5 crossings that will cross over freight rail. So that is where the FRA comes into play with some of our light rail. This policy, again, is intended by the statute to clearly explain the requirements of the statute to individuals who need to comply with it, and those policies and procedures with respect to meeting the requirements. And again, like the FTA policy, we've noted in the policy in bold those things which are Metropolitan Council discretionary policy decisions versus that other which is regulated pretty strictly by the statute. Following approval of these policies, we will work with communications and other stakeholders to get those distributed out to employees and managers who need to have them, and we will update any impacted training and reference materials. So with that, the business items before you are 2025-199 revised FTA drug and alcohol policy, and also approval of business item 2025-200 FRA drug and alcohol policy. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or again refer to Chris Erickson, our subject matter expert.
Councilmember?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking at the transit policy, and I certainly appreciate the extra things you put in bold, because my first question was, who are the covered employees? Covered employees are all Metropolitan Council employees, correct?
For FTA?
Well, if I'm looking, yes, the FTA drug, because what I'm asking is, covered employees who are safety sensitive, that are covered by this, but does the Met Council's overall Drug-Free Workplace Act also does randomized testing or drug testing as well? Because management has to be involved as well as the online workers, frontline workers.
It does cover all of those regulated by statute. So certain positions, not every position will fall under the FTA,
Okay.
since they would have to be safety sensitive or working directly in the support operations. We do have a drug-free workplace policy, which does apply to all employees. So we have several. We will have FTA that covers those employees. FRA will cover those if they're working in the strict rail, not light rail, but rail operations. We have FMCSA, which would be those other CDL holders or DOT regulated employees. That's a separate policy, as well as a non-DOT drug and alcohol policy.
And
So
I've been involved with all of
yeah,
those.
so you're probably getting it. Yes, there is a policy that will cover all of those employees, not this one specifically.
So say people in regional administration, do they get pre-employment testing, and are there rules for reasonable suspicion testing for those people as well? And
Would depend on the position. If they are not a safety sensitive position, we generally don't have those types
I
of
think we need to revisit that.
random reasonable suspicion. Yes, we certainly could revisit that. At this time, no, not every employee is subject to random testing, pre-employment testing.
I understand not the
Yeah.
random, but the reasonable suspicion
Yeah.
testing.
Oh, yes, okay, yes, sorry, yes.
Not the random.
I
because that's
apologize for
huge.
misunderstanding your question.
Hugely
Yes, yes,
expensive,
yes,
and Part of that as well, but pre-employment, the reasonable suspicion.
yes, got you, I'm sorry, yes.
The,
Yeah.
the post-accident testing, even if there's somebody in the office who has some kind of an accident, which happens a lot. Return to duty testing, et cetera. I mean, I think that, the white collar workers also who are non-safety and not working with machines also need to follow the laws as well, and that could be looked at as well, just to make sure, because it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, so to speak, so.
Yes, and we have on a schedule reviewing all of our current
Okay.
drug and alcohol policies. These are the two which are before you now, but we have Chris and also another drug and alcohol program coordinator that we brought on just after I started, so now we're fully staffed and reviewing them all pretty
Thank you.
closely. So yes, thank you for the question.
I just remind you, at this point, we're taking questions or comments for both 2025 199 and 2025 200. And it actually does require a separate action for each one, and we can have a discussion here and then a separate proposal for each of these. So at this point, is there any questions for either one of these? All right, then we'll start with the 199, which is the proposed actions. The Metropolitan Council approved the revised Federal Transit Administration drug and alcohol policy. Entertain a motion to accept this?
So moved.
Been made.
Second.
Made in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving to the B1 2025-200. That the proposed action that Metropolitan Council approved the Federal Railroad Administration drug and alcohol policy.
Move approval.
Made
Second.
and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. I think that concludes the business items, and we'll now move to information. And our first one up is quarterly financial report. And our Ned Smith, our Chief Financial Officer, will be presenting.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is, as John's Councilmember Pacheco stated, Ned Smith. I am the Chief Financial Officer, and I am joined by the budget managers and directors from the divisions. They'll introduce themselves as they come to their section. So just as a reminder, we try to check in. We check in a few times a year to let you know what the results have been so far, and mostly what we're projecting for the end of the year for the state of our budget and performance against it, state of our reserves, and it's just a little bit of a forecast. It's been a couple of months because we let 2 quarters go by. To come in to you after 3 months would be a little early. We wouldn't really have a window into where we're going. So we wait until we've got 6 months of actuals under our belt, and then we do our forecast from there. So I will start with the high level. Across all of the divisions, we look first at our operating reserves, and you can see that they are all mostly well above target. We have two that are a little bit below, and Heather will talk through those when she presents the special transportation services and contracted services, but generally very healthy relative to reserves, so we feel confident and comfortable with where we're at for our cash situation. In terms of the general fund operating performance, we're basically projecting to be on target for our revenues, and our revenues in this case come from property tax and investment income, so we're pretty much forecasting to be on budget there. Expenses are a little bit under 11.5 million, which is about a 7% variance. And that's driven mostly by vacancies and our contractors, especially in information services. Vacancies, we continue to fill seats, but not fast enough. We do account for some of that in our budget, but not entirely. So we will be a little bit under budget for those. And then on transfers, that's about 2 million under, and that's basically because if the general fund comes in lower, we allocate less out to the divisions to pay for it. So if we spend less, we'll allocate less, therefore we'll get less reimbursements or less transfers. But all of that puts our ending reserve balance at 36 million versus a target balance of 15 million. So we're pretty comfortably above. The only caution is 8 million of that is spoken for. Most of that is devoted to our compensated absences. So employees earn vacation time and then we put it into a bank, and then when they go on vacation, we pay them out of there instead of out of our normal operating expenses. So that is just people who have vacation banks, but that's about where we see it's pretty much trending about where we've seen it. It was much higher during the COVID times because nobody took any vacation, but we have seen some of that coming back down to a more normal level. So those are the biggest drivers there, and with that, let's take any questions for general fund, and if there are none, yes.
So, Chair? My question is, and apologize, this is the first time I've gone through these numbers, so just a little bit of educate the new council member. On your first slide, operating reserves, I couldn't figure out where the target percentage, 10%, came from relative to 15 million and 36 million. Where does the target percentage, what does that apply to?
Those are based on the operating budget, but that would not necessarily include debt service. So when you see certainly environmental services, that includes debt service. For environmental services, we only take 10% of the operating budget.
So the 10% would be the 15 million is 10% of the bigger number?
Yes, so for general
Okay.
fund, our overall budget is 151 million in expenses. And our target is 10% there, so that puts us down to 147.
Okay, because I didn't see the 151, so that's why I was trying to figure out where that column came from. That makes sense now.
I believe that there is a fancy report.
A bigger report?
That you have,
Okay.
that we did not include a link to on this particular agenda, and we will need to get that linked for you and for the public, so my apologies for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the general fund? Then I will turn it over to Mr. Selmeyer for environmental services.
Thanks Ned. My name is Matt Selmeyer. I'm a finance manager in environmental services. I'm here to take you through our forecast. And the first thing is that on our revenues, we expect to be $500,000 under budget. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm on the right chart here. And I believe I am, sorry, there's usually, I feel like there's usually a variance column. I'm not seeing one, but you can see the difference between the projected year end and the 2025 budget is about $500,000 for our revenues. There's a couple of offsetting pieces there. We expect to underrun by $1.5 million in industrial charges. That's due to the closure of West Rock. And we also have a credit to pay one of our customers that had a billing issue over the last year. That's about $500,000. So revenue about $500,000 under, $1.5 million underrun. That's offset by investment earnings. You'll probably see that consistently throughout the divisions today, that because interest rates are coming in higher, our investment earnings are gonna be a little bit higher than projected, so even though we're gonna underrun by about 1.5 million in some of our industrial charges, we're gonna overrun by about $1 million in our investment earnings. So netting to about a $500,000 underrun. On the expenses, we plan to underrun by $1.45 million. Again, there's several offsetting pieces. We plan to run under in salaries and benefits due to vacancies, and underrun in utilities due to lower natural gas prices. We also expect to underrun in chemicals and capital outlay. These underruns account to roughly $3 million, but they're offset by a $1.5 million overrun in materials and supplies due to inflation and due to proactive efforts to complete preventative maintenance. On the transfer side, we expect to underrun by 1.075 million. That's driven by the RA expense allocation, and Ned mentioned this a little bit. It's driven largely by vacancies. On the reserve side, our forecast currently has a $6.7 million use of reserves, which is $2 million better than our current budget. This projection will leave us with a $50.4 million reserve at the end of 2025, which is well above our target of $18.4 million. So we're quite healthy overall. And then moving on to our SAC, which stands for Sewer Access Charges. We're projecting 16,500 units in 2025, which is slightly below the 20-year average of 18,500 units. That's driven by small decreases in apartments and as well as the commercial residential combination units that we have. We estimate that the SAC reserve will decrease from 120.7 million in 2024 to 111.7 million in 2025. There's three things driving this. One is the units, which you can see is a little bit lower. This also is driven by planned use of $5 million of our SAC reserve to help fund PAYGO. We do that to help with rate mitigation for our wastewater rates. And then the third piece is we will get there's a little bit of help in there, again, on the investment earnings because our SAC reserve does generate a little bit of investment earnings. So again, there's some offsetting pieces, but we planned for it to go down a little bit. You can see it's going down by about $9 million. Still very healthy, still well above the SAC reserve balance. Any questions on environmental services before I pass it on? All right, I think we didn't sit very coordinated today. Strategically.
Chair, committee members, I'm Heather Giesel. I'm the Director of Finance and Administration for Community Development and Metropolitan Transportation Services. I'll start here with the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Revenues are projected to be favorable to budget by just over $300,000. This is primarily due to investment earnings, like Matt had just mentioned. We do not budget for those, so we're seeing approximately $600,000 in unbudgeted interest earnings. Our expenses, however, are unfavorable to budget by $4.4 million. This is primarily a result of our housing choice voucher payments being $5 million higher than budgeted. We're continuing to see rents across the region increase, and so trying to catch up with those. It's offset slightly by lower spending than budgeted on contracted services and other general administrative expenses. Just as a note, the Housing Choice Voucher Program is currently in shortfall with HUD due to continued inflation outpacing budget authority. This was something that we had brought to the Community Development Committee a couple of weeks ago, and so we have authorized increased expenses in our Q3 amendment that will be coming up here in the next couple of weeks in the housing assistance payment line. We do anticipate that we will receive additional HUD revenue, but we have not heard anything officially from HUD yet, so we're still waiting on that. When and if that revenue comes in from HUD, we would then not have any impact to our reserves. Our projected reserve balance for HRA is $11.4 million, which is above the council's minimum reserve target balance of $9.4 million. Take any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said that you're expecting some funding coming from the HUD. Do you know the numbers?
Chair, committee members, I don't know the exact number, but I believe it would be enough to cover our shortfall. So they have specific shortfall funding that we have applied for. We are just waiting to hear back on when that will arrive. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. Any other questions? Seeing none. Well, thank you. We'll move on to the second item. What?
Oh, sorry.
They're not done.
What's that?
They're not
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, moving on to
Finish that.
MTS.
Second part.
Special Transportation Services, so this is Metro Mobility and Metro Move. Revenue is favorable to budget by $2.7 million as a result of state appropriations being higher than originally budgeted last year. So as we forecasted and worked with MMB, that forecast evolved and there was more money appropriated in the last session bill. Total expenses are favorable to budget by $5.3 million. This is a result of lower salaries, primarily from vacancies, as well as lower admin expenses, including fuel savings of $5.3 million, driven by lower activity on Metro Move, which is contributing to savings in service provider expenses and fuel. Reserves are at $5.75 million right now. This is lower than our targeted balance of $6.6 million. For Metmo, we used more reserves in 2024 than we had anticipated. We were spending our reserve balance down as we were preparing for the transition over to the state forecasted program July 1st, and we saw increased expenses, and so we have dropped below the target balance. However, we have worked with RA budget and are going to be correcting that in 2026. So you'll see a higher MVEST allocated to the MTS programs to bring our reserve balances back up. I don't present on contracted services in this committee presentation typically, but that was another one that you will have seen on the kind of overall slide at the beginning that is also below the target balance for many of the same reasons, just seeing higher costs coming in, using more reserves, and having less MVEST allocated to us over the past couple of years, so adjusting that upward in 2026 to account for the being below target and then building back up again. So I think that is it. Take any questions on transportation services and then I'll pass to Kristen for Metro Transit.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. My name is Kristen Prescott. I'm Acting Finance Director for Metro Transit. And, oops, I'll go ahead. Is this one?
That'd be you.
Is it?
That's you.
It is. Yeah. I missed this slide.
Okay, well, we are running a little short on time. So we could say, here it is for your reference.
Sorry about
And if
that.
there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them offline. And we can jump to, there's our sales tax reserve. Generally, I would point out that it is about in line with what we are forecast as well as our expected reserve levels. So MVEST is relatively healthy. It's a little bit behind the budget forecast, but not so much that we plan at 95% of the rate. So we don't, whatever they forecast, we budget 95% of that is what I'm trying to say. So if it's, we have some wiggle room if it doesn't come in exactly on, but you can see we're pretty much in line with expectations. I would say the same thing for the sales tax and our reserve, but you can see it's healthy.
Okay, so I did prepare on these ones, so. So Metro Transit bus. So our revenues are projected at year end to be favorable by about 143,000. There's a couple of different factors there. One, we'll have higher investment earnings plus some additional earnings at about 1.4, but the offset is going to be a lower passenger fare revenues as well as ridership. And that's a deduct of 1.2, so that's where we get the 143. Expenses, we are projecting to be under budget at about 62.2 million. And the big hitter there is going to be due to our vacant positions, including labor and benefits. Our transfers will be about 1 million over budget, so that'll be unfavorable, and that's due to low allocations. Our change in reserve at the end of the year is a deduct of 101 million, which is better than what we budgeted, which was 162, giving our ending reserve balance of 128.9 million, which is well above our target balance of 45 million. Light rail, our revenues will be below budget by about 2 million. That's due to lower passenger fares revenue. Expenses, we're projecting under budget at about 26.1 million. And that the big cost savings there is gonna be some expenses that were budgeted for enhancing the rail system that are under budget. Transfers will also be under budget, so we'll have a favorable variance about 2.3, and again, that is due to allocations. So our change in reserve balance is 32.2, which is much higher. It's adding to our reserve, which is much higher than what we have budgeted, giving our ending reserve balance to 57 million. Again, it's above our targeted balance. And then the last one is our commuter rail. Revenues will be over budget by about 200,000, and that's due to higher in passenger fares and investing income. Expenses will be under budget at about 1.3 million, and that's really due to vacant positions. And then our transfers will also be under budget, so that'll be favorable of about 300,000, and that too is due to council allocations. So our change in reserve, we were anticipating 4.4 million, but we're only projecting 2.5 deduction in our reserve, giving us an ending reserve balance of 8.9 million, which is well above our target balance of 1.6. Any questions?
This concludes our presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping it brief. My not so subtle attempt at cutting it. Thought it would motivate you, but.
All right,
Thank you.
I'm next, so I'm gonna
Just-
stay here.
You did good.
Thank you all.
All right. Next item we have is, and Ned is back again. Here we are. This is the information, recommended 2026 health and dental premium rates. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. As we've established several times, I'm Ned Smith. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Council. I am joined by Michelle Murray, who is our Senior Manager of Benefits at the Council. We're taking a slightly different approach this year. This used to be entirely owned by finance, but I thought it would be helpful to have a benefits expert talk about benefits. So we changed it up a little bit. So here's kind of the executive summary. So every year we work with Aon to help us do an actuarial projection of our 2026 healthcare expenses, as well based on our enrollments and claims rates and things like that. And they tell us basically, here's what you need to collect for the following year. So that number is 112.7 million is the projected healthcare premiums that we need to collect in 2026. Currently, right now, we're collecting about 100.1 million, or if you forecast our projections forward, enrollments forward. So therefore, we need to increase our funding by 12.6%, which across all of our health insurance systems means we need to increase our rates by 12.6%. We'll talk a little bit how those numbers are going to be a little different than that, but I think what's important to point out here is historically, our 6-year average is only a 7.6% increase. And based on the news I listen to, that's really cheap. Most other health insurance programs are going up double digits every year and have been for a while. We've been, because we're self-insured, because we're efficient, and maybe by some good grace, we've been able to keep our rate increases a little bit less than that. So I'll turn it to Michelle.
Yes, this is a slide summarizing our current plans that we offer to our council employees. The open access plan is staying the same, as well as the distinctions and the empower plans for 2026. The open access plan is restricted to ATU members only. But again, just please note that the overall plan summary, the high level, will be staying the same.
So we use 3 rate-setting principles in determining what rates we need to charge for the following year. The first one is that total premiums must ensure that risk is shared by those enrollees within the same plan choices. So our 3 plans are somewhat different from each other. Some have a higher premium, some have a higher deductible, some have different ways of funding those deductibles. So what we try to do is keep those kind of self-contained. Also, open access is only available to ATU. Distinctions in the HRA is available to everybody, including ATU. So we want to keep the plans kind of separate from each other in terms of open access versus distinctions in HRA, so that the risk and the claims are isolated. So that's principle number 1. And if we look at that, if we take open access separate from distinctions in HRA, open access is actually pretty much on target for based on last year's rates. So we're going to recommend a 0% increase to open access. And then to fill up the other gap across all the systems is distinctions in HRA that is down 12.7 million, and that translates to a 18.5% increase over those 2 plans. Principle 2 says that premiums for each individual plan should be evaluated annually and calibrated to the projected claims expense of that plan, which, as I mentioned earlier, we basically have 2 plans, open access and HRA and distinctions. And we want to keep those separate, so that's principle 1. Principle 2 is within distinctions and HRA, we should manage them to make sure that we don't get any wide swings. And so we don't see wide swings between those 2 programs, so that's why we're still keeping them lumped together with the 18.5% increase. So that's broken out for the 2 plans. We keep them still lumped together and don't break them out. We're not seeing large expense differences between the 2, so that's why open access stays at 0%, distinctions and HRA both jump 18.5%. With that, Michelle will talk through what that means.
So when you apply the 18.5% to the distinctions and the HRA plan, obviously open access, there is a $0 increase, but for distinctions, the single rate will be going up $230 per month, and the HRA plan will be going up $151 per month. And for family coverage for distinctions, it'll be $574 a month, and for the HRA, it'll be $376 a month. The rate splits between the employer and the employee share are all negotiated in our union contracts, and those are individual by union.
And I do like to point out that that little asterisk down there, I think that's one of my favorite parts about working at the council. So HRA is a higher, I don't believe it's technically defined as high deductible, but it's a higher deductible program. And in fact, for a family, the deduction is $2,750. Well, the council puts $2,750 into your account at the beginning of the year, so you basically have no deductible. That's a really slick program. And in terms, so one of the other principles we like to use is risk mitigation. And the 2 ways that we mitigate our risk, one is through reserves. So we have reserves to help us manage through the cash flow monthly. Sometimes all of our expenses don't come in exactly when, we bill our employees 24 times a month, twice a month. And that might not perfectly align with when our expenses come in. So we keep a reserve so that we can manage through those spikes and valleys. And then it also gives us a cushion for years when we have large expenses. So if all of the expenses come in higher than the premiums that we've collected, then we return to our reserve to cover that difference. The other risk mitigation we use is we do have some insurance, stop loss insurance, and that allows us or gives us coverage for up to $750,000 per member, and that's up to 125% of total expected claims. So if there's one individual that goes off and needs $3 million worth of care, we don't have to absorb all of those expenses. So in terms of what that means for our principal, it means that a minimum reserve target should be maintained in order to keep our reserve at a reasonable level. And in this case, we use 35% of our projected expenses. As I mentioned earlier, this lets us mitigate the gaps between high and low. And if there's a migration between plans, which does happen, we're able to cover those differences. And then we can avoid year-to-year. We can avoid significant year-to-year premium fluctuations once the first principle's met. Some of you might say, geez, 18.5% is a pretty considerable expense fluctuation, but we like to think that we use the reserves primarily for our overages. If we use it for rate mitigation, we risk falling behind as expenses continue to grow. So if I thought expenses were going to come back down, then using the reserve would be fine. But if I use a reserve to pay for an ongoing expense, every time I don't charge those expenses in that year, I'm not charging that for future years either. And so my expenses start to grow faster than my revenues, and I'm always trying to dig myself out of a hole. So I, as a CFO, really don't like using reserves to pay for rates. I do like to use them when there's an emergency for one time to get through an exceptionally high claim year, which I think we're going to see this year. But for the principle I like to stick to is using it in case there are material expenses.
So when you look at the trend over the past 6-7 years, you'll see here the line in the middle is what medical trend is. And so that is running at 8%. That's basically like a rate of inflation for medical expenses. But you'll see the differences here between open access increases historically and then the HRA distinctions, which you'll see. The red line of 18.5 for 2026 is much higher than we have historically had to pass on to our employees. This slide shows the enrollment trend by plan. You'll see distinctions has remained fairly steady. We have had increased employee count, and that growth has really been both in the HRA plan and in the open access plan for enrollment.
And this just shows where our operating reserves are for our medical plan. You can see that for 2026 and even part of 2025, we are expecting to be under our target. I'm a little worried about that, but I also feel like the year that I'm increasing the rates by 18.5% is not the year to charge additional that I can build that target back up. So we're going to keep monitoring that. We'll keep looking at our claims expense rates, and we'll determine how to best manage that going forward. But for now, we are projecting to be slightly under our reserve target. On the flip side, target is growing. We are well over our projected target, but you can see the gap between our reserve target and our projected, the gap between our reserve target and our actuals is shrinking. And I do anticipate that will continue to shrink, not as fast as states that have banned fluoride, but this will continue to close, and I believe we will still be in a healthy place. But I do think this is why we're not using reserves to pay for any of our rate increases. 5% is the first time we've increased since 2013 or 2014.
2014.
So I think it's prudent to take that reserve and take that increase and not use the reserve.
So this slide illustrates that we are passing on a 5% increase for the dental plan. As you can see, because the rates are lower, the actual dollar impact is lower, so it'll be a $2 increase for single coverage total and $6 for family coverage.
And with that, we will stand for any questions.
Members? Seeing no questions, comments? Well, thank you for the presentation.
All right.
We're going to move forward. There's no action item here, just a point of information. Appreciate it. And that's Mr. Ned Smith, right?
Yes, I'm the Chief Financial Officer. And the net show is done.
All right, thank you. Now we're moving to our final presentation today. It's our quarterly investment review advisory committee report. Mr. Mark Thompson, what's that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Mark Thompson, I'm the Treasury Director for the council. I'm here to present this information item, which I do each quarter, give you an update on our investment portfolios over the second quarter. So I have a presentation, which I apologize, I'm going to go through very quickly, but 6 slides for the economy, which I usually do a little update on the economy, then we'll talk about each of our portfolios, but due to some time constraints, I'll go very quickly. And so I'm just gonna quickly touch on, I gotta do 2 here. So GDP for the first quarter, I know there's a lot on this screen, but first quarter and the second quarter were really distorted because of fear of tariffs. So if you look at the very far right of this screen is the first and second quarter GDP numbers. On the black line with the yellow dots actually shows the headline number that you care about. Bar broken out into different components of GDP, but the red sections of these show distortions because of tariffs and imports. So the first quarter saw a huge amount of tariffs, which is a negative, or excuse me, imports, which is a huge negative to GDP. So the growth was negative in the first quarter. Then that kind of unwound in the second quarter. We saw very little imports. So the net export number was very high. So the second quarter GDP came out at 3%. So individually, the quarters are very distorted. You can see in this slide that the average over the quarter is 1.25% growth, which is not a strong number. So quickly, I'm just going to go to the next slide, which kind of takes out, this is a subset of GDP, which takes out the trade factor. And you can see in the blue line that domestic growth has actually been declining now for 3 quarters. And consumption, the dark blue portion is, which is a big part of our economy, did not do well the first and second quarters. So growth and consumption seems to be slowing down over the last couple of quarters at least. The inflation, the widespread inflation, which many expected back in March and April, still hasn't happened. We saw, this is a graph of inflation over the past few months, or few years, excuse me, and it's been hovering just under that 3% mark for a number of quarters. And June was at 270, and yesterday we also got July, which is also at 270. Still below the goal, Fed's goal. The Fed's still been waiting for tariff inflation to kick in. We've seen some slight signs of that in June, and then in July we didn't, so it's still wait and see on the tariff inflation. And the Fed is still waiting for that too. The labor market's really kind of sucked all the attention away from inflation. The past, especially since July's labor market data came out last week, extremely low payroll numbers, which is the number of jobs added each quarter. July came in at 73,000 when expectations were for over 100,000 jobs added, and May and June was revised from near 150,000 down to under 20,000 for both months. So there was a big revision to prior months that really scared the markets and showed us that the labor market's cooling much faster than many expected. Treasury yields, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this shows the change in yields over the quarter. Rates dropped in the middle of the curve and stayed the same on the short end, which they will until the Fed changes them, which we expect the Fed to start cutting rates in September. You can see their meetings listed there on the left, but the market's expecting another 3 cuts to happen the rest of this year, bringing their target rate down from what you can see 4.25 to 4.5 down to probably 3.5 to 3 3/4, something like that. So shorter term rates will definitely be changing, and that's going to affect our short-term portfolio, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But S&P 500 had a great quarter. You can see a huge drop in early April. We all know after the tariff announcement, the market kind of collapsed, but it's been going straight up since, and there was a little drop again after the July payroll numbers that just came out last week, and today it's back up 6,450, so it's continues to climb, and we have exposure to that in our OPEB trust, which I'll also cover. Short-term portfolio, this is our cash management portfolio, as you know, not much change quarter to quarter, 1.6 billion, and you can see the allocation on the left, which hasn't really changed. For a number of quarters, we're really just shopping amongst a small number of securities looking for yield. Total return is 1.6 for the quarter, right, just slightly under its benchmark at 110. The average yield is, the total return is just under the benchmark. The average yield is just hanging up there at 430, which is great, but that, like I said, that could change in the next few months. Certainly hurt our interest income, which has been hanging up there good. It was 16.6 for the quarter versus 15.3 million for last quarter. Long-term portfolio, this is our longer term reserves, 495 million. We're invested in a number of securities here. As you can see, not really any change from last quarter again. Total return was 121 versus a 130 in the benchmark. Average book yield has been increasing, and so has our interest income, which is what we're trying to reinvest as lower yielding securities that were bought a number of years ago are finally rolling off, and we're getting to purchase higher yielding investments. So that's slowly getting better and better every quarter. Investment earnings, I haven't shown you this before. This just shows you our total earnings amongst the two portfolios for the last 6 years or so. Really follows what's happening in the market. As you can see, 20 and 21 were, when interest rates were at near zero, and now we're going from 4 or 5 million back then to now we're making just under 80 million last year, and this year should be very similar to that. And when you hear the divisions talk about their investment earnings, that's where this is coming from. This money is allocated out to the different divisions. OPEB trust, this is a trust we have set up and managed by SBI, the state board, and it's been a great tool for us. It's got exposure to the equity markets, to fixed income, and to cash, as you can see, and it's 6.92% for the quarter. Our historical averages are fantastic. 11.3% in 5 years and 9.9 in 10 years. So our OPEB liabilities are fully funded at this point, which is great, and we're taking money out of this trust each fall to pay our annual OPEB expenses. So this continues to be a great performer for us, primarily from the exposure to the equity market, as you know, has been doing fantastic. So that's all I had. Sorry I went so fast, but you have any questions?
Members, questions? Well, those questions, yeah, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, there's a lot going on as far as statistics and how we're going to learn things going into the future. I mean, all of these numbers are coming out of that data, and so much, other than our actuals that we're reporting, right? But some of the predictive things that we're looking at. Are there other tools and resources that we can use should we not be confident in what we're seeing out of the latest statistics?
Right. Mr. Chair, council members, I think we're talking about the labor statistics that you've all heard about. They have major revisions, like I mentioned, in May and June, and they have revisions every month. That's not uncommon. In fact, they're usually revised twice. So, June's, which we just got, will be revised again, and July's will be revised twice. And that's the debate: is how come we can't get accurate data? There was fallout because they were revised so low this time. So that's a dilemma, and I think the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who comes up with the data for that, is having trouble. They're understaffed, and their collection method is to send a survey out to 160-some thousand businesses and government entities every month, and they ask for information back within 2 weeks, and but they don't require it, so they get a lot of late data, a lot of inaccurate data, or they don't get it. So they make a first estimate, which then is hence revised and revised again as more comes in. So now a new person's going to be coming in, and they're looking at possibly changing it from a monthly statistic to a quarterly. And maybe temporary, maybe not, as they try to make improvements they want to make. So there are plenty of other labor statistic data that we can look at. You know, there's average earnings, and there's the unemployment rate, and there's probably a handful of others that we can kind of watch, and that's what we're going to have to do. And I think we don't react to changes in the labor number every month. I mean, we're not changing what we're doing, but we use it to try to help us in the overall picture think about where rates are going generally. And of course, the Fed's relying on that too, and it makes it difficult for them if numbers keep changing or they're not getting timely data. So that's going to be an interesting dilemma. So I think there's a lot more to come on that.
And if I may, there's other like leading indicators, like some of the manufacturing things that we really saw those numbers. We saw how some of those leading indicators were the things that told us what was happening during supply chain issues during COVID. And is that are those numbers coming out of the federal government as well? And where are they coming from? Because that also gives us a pretty good idea of where some of these other impacts are going to hit.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, committee members, there's economic statistics coming out every day, many of them. And we don't watch, I don't watch every single one of them every day, but I watch a lot of them. And they come from various agencies. So yeah, I mean, there's, CPI is also coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with their data, but I'm just saying that we are kind of relying on that. And we do watch a lot of them.
I know it's a hard question.
Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing we can change other than try to look at what we can and I listen to a lot of economists on a daily basis and see what their thoughts are in the future, where rates are going. And of course, the Fed talks all the time too.
So you and your predecessor taught me well, so I know what to look for now. So it's like, so I'm asking, that's why I'm asking some of the tough questions, because it does, impacts even some of our longer term decisions, even in purchasing world and some of those other things.
In this latest data, the July labor statistics, you mentioned manufacturing, they're flat. They're not adding any jobs, so. The federal government was down 12,000. There's numbers within there we can watch too. But.
And if the federal government was only down 12,000, that's
Okay, I think that concludes the presentation.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. And I think we now are moving for number 4, labor strategy. For this, we have a motion.
Yes, Chair. I move we close this meeting under section 13D.03 subdivision 1 of the Minnesota statutes so we can consider a labor development and negotiation related to labor strategies.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
They actually closed the meeting already.
Yeah, and I love this one better than the division. And they usually have like say,
All right.
Here's all the investment stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, close and pay radio, so here you can actually, we can close and do it. So you can find out where, what's pushing these numbers for all the things. So to me, this is really helpful. So,
Good.
yeah,
Cool, thank you.
yep,
And second it, and now you read this.
and especially when you start with this, it's like, what numbers number what?
Right.
Yeah, so, and usually it is a link, and it isn't.
So we have a motion that's been made and seconded, and now we go to the discussion here. The governing body of a public employer, by majority vote in a public meeting, may decide to hold a closed meeting under the provision of section 13D.03, subdivision IB of the Minnesota statutes. The discussion at a meeting closed under this law must be confined to labor negotiation strategies, developments and/or discussion and review of labor proposals. The proceeding of a meeting closed under this law will be tape recorded, preserved for 2 years, and made available to the public as provided by law. Vote on motion to close the meeting. Closing the meeting, chair announces.
No, vote on them, say all in favor.
Okay, we have the motion has been made and seconded, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
No, motion passes.
And now you read the numbers.
All right, well, before we close the meeting to discuss labor strategies, I would like to inform members of the public who are monitoring this meeting, and for the record, that the committee will adjourn immediately after the discussion of this information, and the committee will not have any discussions or conduct any business after this information item is complete. For the record, please note this meeting was closed to the public at
3:36.
3:46. 3:36 p.m. on August 13th, 2025.